They called me a gold digger right to my face, clinking glasses as if I were nothing more than rented jewelry. My fiancé just smiled, too cowardly to defend me. But there was one detail they missed. The most vital contract of the evening was not in their hands. When the spotlights cut out tonight, the only person left holding the keys to this entire building will be me. My name is Mara Kensington. I am 32 years old, and I have spent the better part of a decade clawing my way up from a shared studio apartment in the bad part of town to the corner office of Northbridge Civic Group. As the chief operating officer of a high-end event management firm, my life is governed by spreadsheets, critical paths, and the absolute certainty that if you do not control the room will control you. I know how to make a space breathe. I know that amber lighting hides wrinkles, and that a well-timed tray of champagne can diffuse a diplomatic incident. I built myself on competence. I built myself on being the person who holds the keys. Yet, as I stood outside the iron gates of the Larkfield Conservatory on the outskirts of Nashville, none of that seemed to matter. The Larkfield is a legend in this city. It is a Victorian-era glasshouse, a botanical cathedral of wrought iron and curved panes that supposedly costs $50,000 just to unlock the front doors. It is the kind of place where old money comes to celebrate itself. The air inside is usually thick with the scent of orchids and the distinct, metallic smell of generational wealth. I arrived 45 minutes early. It was a reflex I could not shake. Even though tonight was supposed to be my night, the night I officially became the fiancé of Grant Hale. My brain was still wired for operations. I wanted to check the sightlines. I wanted to make sure the audio feedback loop had been addressed and that the timeline for the speeches was tight. I walked toward the service entrance, my heels clicking a sharp, authoritative rhythm on the cobblestones. A security guard with a neck as thick as a tree trunk stepped into my path. He did not look at my face. He looked at his clipboard. "Staff entrance is around back, miss," he rumbled. I felt a flicker of annoyance, but I kept my smile polite. "I am not staff. I am the bride-to-be, Mara Kensington." He ran a thick finger down the list. He flipped the page. He flipped it back. "I have a Grant Hale listed as the principal, and a +1, no Kensington." The air left my lungs. +1, I was the reason for the party. Yet on the official security manifest, I was a nameless appendage, an accessory. "Check again," I said, my voice hardening. "It says +1, he repeated, bored. "You can wait over there until Mr. Hale vouches for you." Before I could unzip the side of my bag to pull out my phone and call Grant, a hand clamped onto my upper arm. It was soft, manicured, and incredibly strong. "There you are, Mara," Cynthia Hale cooed. My future mother-in-law was wearing a silver gown that probably cost more than my first car. She smiled, but the expression did not reach her eyes. It never did. "Let's not make a scene at the gate, dear. It looks so desperate." She pulled me through the gate, waving at the guard who immediately stepped aside for a hail. She did not take me to the receiving line. She did not take me to the bridal suite to freshen up. Instead, she steered me toward the far corner of the conservatory, where the lighting was dim and the shadows of the palm fronds were heavy. "We need to keep the entrance clear for the photographer," Cynthia said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that felt like ice water. "The lighting is tricky at this time of day. You have such a distinct profile. Mara, it is better if we get the candid shots of Grant first. He looks so regal tonight, doesn't he?" I looked across the room. Grant was standing near the center fountain, holding a crystal tumbler of scotch. He was laughing, his head thrown back, surrounded by men in bespoke suits and women dripping in diamonds. He looked the part of the golden boy. He looked like the heir to the Hale dynasty. He also looked like a man who had completely forgotten he was supposed to be getting married. "He promised he would meet me at the door," I said, mostly to myself. "Grant is busy being the face of the family," Cynthia snapped, her grip on my arm tightening for a fraction of a second before releasing. "He has investors to charm. You understand that, don't you? Or is business too complex for you?" I bit my tongue. I managed operations for multi-million-dollar civic projects. I understood business better than Grant, who had never signed the front of a paycheck in his life. But tonight, I was trying. I was trying to be the good partner. "Where are we sitting?" I asked, looking toward the head table. It was set on a raised platform, draped in heavy white linen and adorned with towering centerpieces of white hydrangeas. Cynthia smoothed the front of her dress. "Oh, the head table is strictly for the immediate family and the board members. We have to discuss the quarterly projections during dinner. It is a working celebration, you understand." She pointed a manicured finger toward the back of the room. "We put you at table 19. It is cozy." I followed her finger. Table 19 was not cozy. It was in the logistical dead zone. It was shoved right up against the swinging double doors of the kitchen. I could already see the servers rushing in and out, the flash of stainless steel, the steam from the dishwashers. It was the table you gave to the second cousins you hated, or the vendors you were obligated to feed. I was the bride, and I was being seated in the servants' quarters. "Does Grant know?" I asked. "Grant trusts my judgment," Cynthia said. She turned to face me fully, her smile vanishing, the mask dropped. "Listen to me, Mara. You might have charmed my son with your little career girl act, but do not mistake his infatuation for a seat at the table. The Hale family does not like outsiders, and we certainly do not like people who marry for money. Do not make this family look bad tonight." She didn't wait for an answer. She spun on her heel and floated away toward the VIPs. I stood there, feeling the humidity of the greenhouse pressing against my skin. I walked over to table 19. My name card was there. Just Mara. No last name. No future Mrs. Hale. Just a piece of cardstock that looked like an afterthought. I sat down. The seat was wobbly. From here, I could see everything, but no one could really see me. I was invisible. Grant was making his rounds. He moved through the crowd, shaking hands, kissing cheeks. I watched him. I waited for him to look for me. I waited for him to scan the room, to check the entrance, to ask his mother where I was. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 20. He never looked. He came near my area once. On his way to the bar, I stood up, my hand reaching out. "Grant?" He stopped, blinking as if he was surprised to see me there. "Oh, hey babe, you made it." "I have been here for 30 minutes, I said. "Your mother put me at the kitchen table." He laughed, a nervous, dismissive sound. "Mom's just stressed about the seating chart. Don't be so sensitive. I'll handle it later. Just grab a drink and mingle. You look great." He patted my shoulder, patted, like I was a well-behaved spaniel, and turned back to a man who was asking him about his golf handicap. "I'll handle it." That was Grant's favorite phrase. He never handled anything. He just deferred it until it went away, or until someone else fixed it. I sat back down. The waiter kicked the back of my chair as he rushed past with a tray of soup. I didn't move. A group of women drifted near my table. They were Grant's aunts and cousins, a phalanx of pearls and pastel silk. They didn't see me sitting in the shadows of the ficus tree. "I still cannot believe he's going through with it," one of them said. She was holding a martini glass with a dangerous tilt. "She is nobody. A manager? What does that even mean? It means she takes orders." "Grant is just having a rebellious phase," another voice chimed in. It was Aunt Beatrice. I recognized her shrill tone. "He likes them gritty, but honestly, look at the way she dresses. It screams department store." "She is looking for a payout," the first woman said. She laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. "Cynthia is smart to keep the accounts separate. You have to be careful with these types. Look at her and you just know. She is a gold digger." The word hung in the humid air. Gold digger. They laughed together, clinking their glasses, satisfied with their verdict. They moved on, leaving the poison in their wake. I sat very still. I should have been crying. A younger version of me, the Mara who was 22 and desperate to be liked, would have been in the bathroom sobbing by now. I would have been fixing my mascara and telling myself that if I just tried harder, if I just loved him enough, they would accept me. But I was not 22. I was 32. I had negotiated contracts worth $5 million. I had fired people twice my age for incompetence. I had built a life out of grit and steel. I checked my pulse. It was steady. I looked at Grant, who was now at the head table, laughing at something his father said. He was sitting in the seat of honor. My seat was empty next to him, and he hadn't even noticed. Or worse, he had noticed, and he didn't care. He was letting them do this. He was letting them erase me. Something in my chest did not break. It did not shatter. It shifted. It was a mechanical sensation, like a heavy gear slipping off a rusted track and locking into a new, dangerous alignment. It was the feeling of a machine that had been running on tolerance and hope, suddenly running out of fuel and switching to emergency power. I was not sad. I was not heartbroken. I was cold. I looked around the room, really looked at it, not as a bride, but as an operator. I saw the water stain on the velvet curtain behind the stage. I saw the way the waitstaff were underserving the wine, rationing it as if supply was low. I saw the frantic whispering between the venue manager and the head caterer. This was not a palace. It was a facade. And the Hales? They were not royalty. They were bullies in rented tuxedos. They called me a gold digger. They thought I was here to take their money. They had no idea. I didn't want their money. I didn't want their approval. The gear in my chest locked tight. If they wanted to treat me like a hostile acquisition, then I would show them how a takeover actually worked. I picked up my clutch. I didn't reach for a tissue. I reached for my phone. I had a text to send. But first, I was going to sit here and watch. I was going to let them think they had won. I was going to let the humiliation wash over me, cataloging every insult, every laugh, every dismissive glance. Because the bill was coming due, and I was going to be the one collecting it, the master of ceremonies, a man with a baritone voice that sounded expensive and rented. Tap the microphone. The sound echoed off the glass ceiling of the conservatory, cutting through the low hum of conversation. He looked at his cue cards, then scanned the room until his eyes landed on me, sitting in the shadows near the kitchen doors. "And now," he announced, beaming with professional enthusiasm, "we would love to hear a few words from the woman who stole our Grant's heart. Ladies and gentlemen, the bride-to-be, Mara." He extended a hand toward me. For a split second, the spotlight swung in my direction, blinding me. I stood up, smoothing the front of my dress, preparing to walk toward the stage. I had a speech prepared. It was gracious. It was kind. It thanked the Hales for welcoming me. It was a lie, but it was a polite one. But before I could take a single step, Cynthia was there. She moved with the speed of a viper striking from the grass. She stepped onto the riser next to the MC and placed her hand firmly over the microphone's grill. The feedback squealed for a fraction of a second, a sharp noise that made everyone wince, before she smiled. It was a benevolent, pitying smile. "Oh, let's not put poor Mara on the spot," Cynthia said, her voice projecting effortlessly even without the amplification. She laughed, a light tinkling sound that invited the room to join her. "She is terrified of public speaking. You know how it is. She is just a little overwhelmed by all of this. She has only just joined us. After all, let's let her enjoy her dinner in peace." The MC looked confused, but he knew who signed the checks. He nodded and lowered the microphone. "Of course. My apologies." I stood there, frozen, half risen from my chair. The spotlight clicked off, plunging me back into the gloom. Cynthia had not just silenced me. She had erased my voice. She had told 200 of Nashville's elite that I was weak, that I was unsophisticated, and that I did not belong on their stage. I slowly sank back into my seat. The blood rushed to my ears, hot and thrumming. "Good call," a voice said to my right. I turned. A group of men had pulled their chairs closer to my table, though they had their backs mostly turned to me. They were Grant's friends from prep school, men named Tripp and Carter and Sterling. They wore watches that cost more than my father's life insurance payout. They were currently discussing a leveraged buyout of a pharmaceutical chain in the Midwest. "The margins are razor thin," one of them said, swirling his bourbon. "But if we strip the assets and sell the real estate, we come out ahead by 40%. "Smart," another nodded. He turned slightly, his eyes sliding over me with the casual indifference one reserves for a piece of furniture. "Grant tells us you work, Mara. What is it you do? PR? Customer service?" The assumption was breathtaking in its arrogance. To them, a woman from my background could only exist in a service role. I was there to smile, to apologize, to smooth things over. I straightened my spine. I picked up my water glass, taking a sip to steady my voice. "I am the Chief Operating Officer for Northbridge Civic Group," I said clearly. "I manage venue acquisition, large-scale event logistics, and operational contracts for municipal developments." The man blinked. For a second, I thought I saw a flicker of respect. Then he chuckled. "Right, operations," he said, nodding to his friends. "Making sure the caterers show up on time and the napkins are folded. That is cute. It is good to stay busy. Keeps you grounded." He turned back to his friends. "Anyway, about the trust fund distribution." They dismissed me. I wasn't a COO to them. I was hired help who had managed to sleep her way into a promotion. Cynthia drifted by the table a moment later, her hand resting on the shoulder of the man who had just insulted me. She looked at me, her eyes gleaming with triumph. "I hope the boys are not boring you with business talk. Mara," she said, "I know it can be dry if you are not used to that level of finance, but you will learn, although, honestly, nobody expects you to understand the complexities of the Hale estate. We have people for that." She looked around the table, addressing the men. "You have to be gentle with her. Mara does not come from a background where people worry about capital gains taxes. Her family is very salt of the earth." It was a code word. Poor. She meant poor. She was telling them that I was hungry. She was validating every whisper, every side eye, every joke about the gold digger. "We are just happy Grant found someone," the man named Sterling said, smirking. "Even if it is a bit of a charity case." The table erupted in laughter. It was not loud, raucous laughter. It was the quiet, wheezing laughter of men who believed they were untouchable. I looked for Grant. I needed him to step in. I needed him to say, "Stop it. She is brilliant. She is successful. She is the woman I love." I found him standing 3 feet away. He had heard it. He had heard every word. He caught my eye and gave a small, helpless shrug. He leaned in, his breath smelling of scotch and mint. "Don't be so sensitive, Mara," he whispered. "They are just blowing off steam. It is just a joke. You need to learn to roll with the punches if you are going to be a Hale wife." The coldness that had started in my chest in the garden now spread to my limbs. This was not a party. This was an initiation. They were breaking me. They were testing the fences to see how much abuse I would take before I snapped. They wanted to know if I was desperate enough for their money to swallow my pride. Grant did not want a partner. He wanted a doormat. I looked at him, really looked at him, and the handsome face I had fallen in love with suddenly looked soft and weak. He was a man made of putty, molded by his mother's hands. "I am not laughing," I said softly. "You never do," Grant sighed, rolling his eyes. "Lighten up." He walked away to get another drink. As he left, a man I vaguely recognized as Grant's uncle, a lawyer named Philip, I think, slid into the empty chair next to me. He did not smile. He did not offer congratulations. He placed a thick, cream-colored envelope on the table in front of me. "Just some housekeeping," Philip said, tapping the envelope with a manicured fingernail. "We need to get the paperwork out of the way before the actual ceremony, for the license application and the insurance. You know how it is. Red tape." "Now?" I asked. "In the middle of the engagement party?" "Best to get it done while everyone is here," he said breezily. "Just sign at the tabs. Grant already signed his copy." He offered me a gold fountain pen. I took the envelope, but I did not take the pen. My training kicked in. You never sign what you have not read. Not ever. Not even if your fiancé's uncle is staring at you with impatient eyes. "I will just take a quick look," I said. "It is standard boilerplate," Philip said, his voice sharpening slightly. "We are on a timeline. Mara, the photographer, is waiting for the cake cutting." I ignored him. I slid the documents out. The first page looked like a standard prenuptial agreement. distinct from the one my own lawyer had already reviewed. But as I flipped the page, something caught my eye. It was buried in the middle of a paragraph about joint tax filing. Clause 14b. The undersigned grants irrevocable power of attorney to the Hale Family Trust regarding all present and future assets acquired during the union, including but not limited to business equity, real estate holdings, and intellectual property, to be managed at the sole discretion of the trust for the benefit of the lineage. I froze. This was not a prenup. This was a surrender. If I signed this, I wasn't just agreeing to separate finances. I was handing over control of everything I built, everything I earned, and everything I owned to Cynthia and her board of directors. They knew about my investments. They knew about my career. They framed me as a gold digger. But this clause was designed to strip mine me. They wanted to own me. Is there a problem? Philip asked, his tone dropping an octave. It is just standard language for a family of this magnitude. It is very interesting language, I said. My voice was steady, terrifyingly calm. I folded the document back into the envelope. I did not pick up the pen. I will sign it later, I lied. I want to read it in better light. Mara, really, this is ridiculous, Philip snapped. Grant is waiting. Then he can wait 10 minutes more, I said. I slipped the envelope into my clutch and snapped it shut. The click sounded like a gunshot in the intimate space between us. Philip glared at me, his jaw working, but he couldn't cause a scene without drawing attention to what he was trying to make me sign. He stood up, buttoning his jacket aggressively. Do not take too long, he warned. Cynthia likes things to run on schedule. He walked away. I sat alone at the wobbly table near the kitchen. The waiters rushed past me with trays of filet mignon that I would never taste. The room was filled with laughter and the clinking of crystal. To the casual observer, I was just the quiet bride, overwhelmed by the grandeur of the Hale family. But inside, the machinery was humming. The gears were locking into place. They thought I was trapped. They thought I was a poor girl dazzled by the lights, willing to sign away my soul just to stay in the room. They had made a critical error. They assumed that because I sat in the dark, I was powerless. But the dark is where the operators work. The dark is where you cut the wires. I looked at the exit. Then I looked at the service door leading to the administrative offices. I stood up. I didn't look at Grant. I didn't look at Cynthia. I smoothed my skirt, picked up my bag containing the evidence of their greed, and walked toward the back of the house. The party was about to get very interesting. But first, I had a purchase to make. I walked away from the table, clutching my purse against my ribs like a shield. But my mind was no longer on defense. The envelope with the predatory contract sat heavy in my bag, a physical weight that grounded me. I had left the emotional bride back at table 19. The woman walking toward the service corridor was the chief operating officer of Northbridge Civic Group, and she was currently conducting an unauthorized site inspection. The Larkfield Conservatory was famous for its ethereal beauty. In the magazines, it was a dreamscape of Victorian ironwork and exotic flora. But magazines are static. Reality is operational. As I moved away from the main cluster of guests and toward the periphery of the room, the cracks in the facade began to show. I paused by a towering arrangement of birds of paradise near the east wing. To a guest, it was just a lush display. To me, it was a distraction. I looked down at the base of the planter. The parquet flooring was water damaged, the wood warped and stained dark. Instead of repairing it, someone had artfully draped a heavy velvet runner over the spot. It was a cheap fix, a temporary bandage on a structural wound. I continued walking, my eyes scanning the ceiling. The lighting rig was impressive, a complex truss system designed to mimic moonlight, but 3 of the cans were dark, and the cabling running down the support beam was secured with black gaffer tape rather than proper conduit clips. That was a code violation. More importantly, it was lazy. I watched the staff. In high-end events, the core team moves like a ballet troupe, silent, synchronized, and invisible. These servers were different. They were frantic. I spotted 3 different styles of black trousers and 2 variations of the white shirt. These were not staff on the venue's payroll. They were agency hires, brought in last minute to fill gaps. Agency staff cost more per hour, but require no benefits and no long-term commitment. A venue only relies this heavily on temp labor if they cannot afford to keep a permanent team on the roster. The Larkfield Conservatory was bleeding money. I turned the corner toward the AV booth and nearly collided with a man holding a clipboard. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. His tie was loosened, and there was a sheen of sweat on his forehead that the climate control could not account for. "I am so sorry, ma'am," he stammered, stepping back. "I was just checking the run of show." I recognized him, Elijah Rowe. He was the venue manager. I had seen his picture on the website when I was doing my initial due diligence, back when I thought I was just a happy bride planning a wedding. "It is fine, Elijah," I said, keeping my voice low and level. "But you might want to check the breaker panel in the north quadrant. The LEDs are flickering. You are drawing too much power on an old circuit." He blinked, surprised that I knew his name, and even more surprised that I knew about the load-bearing capacity of his electrical grid. Yes, we have been meaning to upgrade the capacitor," he said, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "It is on the list for next quarter." "Next quarter is a long time away when you have a room full of people and a fire marshal who counts exits," I said. He looked at me, really looked at me, and the customer service mask slipped. He saw someone who spoke the language. "It has been a difficult year," Elijah admitted, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The owner, Ms. Mercer, she is very particular about preservation. It is expensive to maintain a glass house in this climate." "And expensive to heat it," I added. "I noticed you have the vents wide open, but the ambient temperature is still dropping. Your boiler is failing, isn't it?" Elijah winced. "We are handling it." Just then, a peal of laughter cut through the air. I looked over Elijah's shoulder. Cynthia Hale was holding court near the bar, surrounded by a group of admirers. She was gesturing grandly toward the glass dome above us. "Oh, the cost was astronomical, of course," I heard Cynthia say, her voice carrying with that practiced projection of the upper class. "But for Grant, we wanted the best. We told them, money is no object. We pulled quite a few strings to get this date. The Hales always pay for quality." The admirers cooed appreciatively. I looked back at Elijah. His jaw tightened. A small muscle jumped in his cheek. It was a micro-expression of resentment that only appears when a client lies to your face. "She says money is no object," I murmured, leaning in slightly. "So I assume they paid the premium rush fee for the Saturday booking?" Elijah looked down at his clipboard. He hesitated. In this industry, discretion is the currency. You never talk about a client's bill, but I was not just a client, I was the bride. Technically, this was my party, even if I wasn't paying for it. "The Hales are valued clients," Elijah said, choosing his words with agonizing care. "Valued clients who pay on time?" I pressed. Elijah let out a short, sharp breath through his nose. "There has been some administrative delay with the final balance. Mrs. Hale assured us the wire transfer was initiated yesterday. We are operating on good faith tonight." Good faith. I almost laughed. The Hales did not operate on good faith. They operated on intimidation and the assumption that vendors were too scared of losing future business to demand payment up front. They were stiffing the venue. They were eating filet mignon and drinking vintage champagne on credit, gambling that the venue manager would be too polite to pull the plug. "They haven't paid you," I stated. It wasn't a question. Elijah didn't deny it. He just looked miserable. "If the wire does not clear by Monday, I do not know how I'm going to pay the agency staff. Ms. Mercer is already looking at bridge loans." The pieces clicked together in my mind with the satisfying precision of a vault door locking. The crumbling maintenance, the agency staff, the owner's desperation, the Hales' arrogance. And then, a memory surfaced, a detail I had filed away weeks ago during my day job and forgotten until this exact moment. 3 weeks ago, my personal investment firm, a quiet, completely legal LLC named Juniper Slate, that I used for real estate speculation, had received a ping from a broker. There was a distressed commercial property on the market, a historic venue in Nashville that was quietly looking for a private buyer to avoid bankruptcy. The listing had been anonymous, described only as a turn-of-the-century botanical structure with liquidity issues. I hadn't pursued it at the time because I was too busy planning a wedding. But standing here now, looking at the water damage and the sweating manager, I realized the anonymous listing was the Larkfield Conservatory. Vivian Mercer, the owner, wasn't just particular about preservation. She was drowning. She was looking for a lifeline. And the Hales? They weren't a lifeline. They were an anchor. They were exploiting a dying business, squeezing it for freebies and prestige, knowing the owner was too weak to fight back. This entire evening, the lights, the music, the insults, the power plays, was taking place on a stage that was moments away from collapsing. The Hales thought they were the kings and queens of the castle, but they were squatting in a house of cards. And I happened to be the only person in the room who knew how to buy the wind. My heart rate slowed. The humiliation I had felt earlier evaporated, replaced by the cold, exhilarating clarity of a deal taking shape. I wasn't the poor girl from the wrong side of the tracks anymore. I was the potential investor. "Elijah," I said, my voice changing. It became sharper, more authoritative. "Is Ms. Mercer on site tonight?" "She is in the back office," Elijah said, confused by the shift in my demeanor. "She is trying to sort out the catering invoice, but she does not see guests during events." "She will see me," I said. "Ms. Kensington, I really do not think—" "Tell her I am not here as the bride." I cut him off. "Tell her I am here representing Juniper Slate LLC. Tell her we are interested in the listing she floated 3 weeks ago. And tell her I'm ready to close tonight." Elijah's mouth opened slightly. He stared at me. The name Juniper Slate clearly meant something to him, or at least, the prospect of a buyer was enough to override his protocol. You are with Juniper Slate?" he whispered. "I am Juniper Slate," I corrected. I didn't wait for him to respond. I turned away. Reaching into my clutch for my phone, I saw Grant across the room, laughing as he signed a guest book, playing the role of the benevolent prince. He looked so comfortable. He had no idea that the ground beneath his feet was for sale. I unlocked my phone and pulled up my secure messaging app. I found the contact for my attorney, a shark named Marcus, who billed by the minute and was worth every penny. I typed a single message. "Activate Plan B. Prepare the acquisition papers for the Larkfield property. I need the draft in my inbox in 15 minutes. I am buying the venue." I hit send. I watched the delivered checkmark appear. The Hales wanted to talk about net worth? Fine, we would talk about net worth. They wanted to leverage assets? I was about to show them the difference between leveraging an asset and owning it. I looked back at the party. The music seemed to slow down. The laughter seemed brittle. I wasn't just a guest anymore. I wasn't just a bride. I was the prospective landlord, and the eviction notice was being drafted right now. I smoothed my dress and walked toward the back office door. It was time to negotiate the most important contract of my life. Not a marriage license, a deed. I had barely taken 3 steps toward the administrative corridor when the air shifted. It was a subtle change in pressure, the kind you feel right before a storm breaks. A hand wrapped around my elbow. It was not the firm, guiding grip of a colleague. It was the vice-like clamp of a captor. "Where do you think you are going, Mara?" Cynthia asked. Her voice was dripping with a synthetic sweetness that made my skin crawl. "The photographer is setting up for the family portrait. We cannot have the bride wandering off into the service hallways. It looks unstable." Before I could answer, she steered me sharply to the left, pushing me through a set of mahogany doors into a small, private staging room used for bridal parties. The noise of the party, the clinking glass, the laughter, the jazz quartet, was instantly severed as the heavy doors clicked shut. The silence in the room was suffocating. Grant was already there. He was leaning against a faux vintage vanity table, studying the toes of his Italian loafers as if they held the secrets of the universe. He did not look up when I entered. He looked like a schoolboy waiting for the principal, radiating a mix of guilt and petulance. Cynthia released my arm and smoothed the front of her silver gown. She gestured to a velvet armchair. "Sit down, dear," she said. It was not a request. I remained standing. I adjusted my clutch, feeling the sharp corner of the envelope inside. "I am fine standing. Cynthia, what is this about?" "We just want you to be comfortable," Cynthia said, her eyes wide and innocent. "Grant and I were talking, and we realized you seemed hesitant about the paperwork earlier. We wanted to reassure you. This family protects its own, Mara. We just want to make sure you are fully integrated before the chaos of the wedding planning really begins." She extended a hand toward Grant. "Grant, give her the pen." Grant finally looked up. His face was flushed, his eyes darting between me and his mother. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a heavy Mont Blanc pen. He held it out to me, but he didn't step closer. "Just sign it, Mara," he said, his voice thin. "Mom says it is important for the trust. It just keeps things clean. You know I hate talking about money." "I know you hate talking about anything that requires a backbone." I thought, but I kept my face impassive. I reached into my bag and pulled out the envelope his uncle had forced on me. I slowly unwound the string closure. The paper rustled loudly in the quiet room. I read the document. "Grant," I said, keeping my eyes on him. "Did you?" "I trust my family," Grant muttered, looking back at his shoes. "That is a mistake," I said. I opened the document to page 4, where the terrifying clause sat in dense, single-spaced block text. I held it up. "Cynthia," I said, turning to her, "this is not a prenuptial agreement. A prenup lists assets and protects them in the event of a divorce. This is a grant of authority." I ran my finger under the lines I had memorized. Clause 14b states that upon marriage, I grant the Hale Family Trust full, irrevocable power of attorney over all my current and future financial instruments. It gives you the right to buy, sell, transfer, or liquidate any asset in my name without my countersignature. It gives you the right to manage my earnings. It effectively declares me incompetent and appoints you as my guardian. I lowered the paper. The room felt very small. "Why is there a conservatorship clause in my marriage contract?" I asked. Cynthia did not flinch. She let out a small, exasperated sigh, as if I were a toddler refusing to eat my vegetables. "Oh, Mara, do not be so dramatic," she said, waving a hand dismissively. "It is standard legal language. We use it for all the children. It simplifies things. When we move money between the offshore accounts and the domestic trusts, we need to be able to act quickly. We cannot be chasing you down for a signature every time the market shifts." "I do not have offshore accounts," I said, "and I am not one of your children." "Exactly," Cynthia laughed, a cold, sharp sound. "You have nothing. That is the point, dear. You are making such a fuss over rights to—" "What? Your little salary? Your used car? You have no assets to protect, Mara. So why are you so afraid? What do you have to lose?" It was a trap, a verbal snare. If I argued that I had assets, they would accuse me of hiding things, of being the gold digger they claimed I was. If I agreed I had nothing, then her logic held. Why not sign? But I saw the logic flaw. It was glaring. "If I have nothing," I said slowly, locking eyes with her, "and if I am bringing zero value to this marriage financially, then why do you need legal control over my finances? Why do you need a power of attorney for an empty bank account?" Cynthia's smile faltered. For the first time, the mask of the benevolent matriarch slipped, revealing the predator underneath. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. We both knew the answer. They knew I wasn't just a receptionist. They knew about Juniper Slate, or if they didn't know specifically, they smelled it. They smelled competence. They smelled potential. And they wanted to own it before it got too big to control. They didn't just want to ensure I didn't take their money. They wanted to ensure that any money I ever made became theirs. "Grant," I said, turning to him, "do you understand what this says? It means if I build a company, your mother owns it. It means if I write a book, your mother takes the royalties. It means I cannot even open a checking account without the trust's permission. Grant pushed himself off the vanity table, his face twisted into a scowl. He wasn't angry at the contract. He was angry at me for reading it. God, Mara, why do you have to make everything so difficult? He shouted. The sudden volume made me flinch. It is just paper. We are getting married. What is mine is yours. What is yours is mine. Why are you so obsessed with keeping things separate? Do you plan on leaving me? Is that it? I plan on being an adult, I said calmly. Adults control their own lives. You are embarrassing me, Grant hissed, stepping closer. He loomed over me, using his height as a weapon. My family is trying to welcome you. They are trying to simplify our lives so we do not have to worry about the business side of things, and you are standing here acting like a paranoid lawyer. Just sign the damn paper. Mara, we are due for photos in 5 minutes, and I am not going out there with you looking like this. Like what? I asked. Like you are better than us, he spat. And there it was, the truth. It wasn't about the money, it was about the hierarchy. They needed me to be smaller. They needed me to be dependent. As long as I had my own autonomy, I was a threat. Grant didn't want a wife. He wanted a subordinate. He wanted to look benevolent by rescuing the poor girl. But he couldn't handle the reality that the poor girl didn't need rescuing. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. They weren't just trying to exclude me from their world. They were trying to hijack mine. I looked at the pen in Grant's hand. Then I looked at Cynthia, who was watching me with the cold calculation of a butcher eyeing a lamb. I had 2 choices. I could scream, throw the papers in their faces, and storm out. That would be satisfying. It would also be messy. They would spin the story. They would tell everyone I was hysterical, that I demanded money, that I caused a scene. They would win the narrative. Or I could play the game. I forced my shoulders to drop. I let my face soften. I looked down at the floor, mimicking the submission they wanted to see. I am sorry, I whispered. It is a lot of legal text. I got scared. The tension in the room instantly evaporated. Cynthia beamed. Grant let out a long breath and relaxed his posture. I had given them what they wanted. The fear. Of course you did. Darling, Cynthia cooed, stepping forward to pat my cheek. Her hand felt like cold marble. It is overwhelming. We understand. That is why we handle it for you. I just need a moment, I said, my voice trembling slightly. I feel a little faint. Can I just have 10 minutes? I need to drink some water and fix my makeup. I want to look perfect for the photos. I do not want to embarrass you. Grant. Grant softened immediately. Yeah, okay, take 10 minutes. But hurry up. I will tell the photographer to wait. Leave the papers here, Cynthia said, pointing to the table. You can sign them when you are fresh. Okay, I said. I placed the envelope on the table. I turned and walked to the door. I opened it and stepped out into the hallway. 10 minutes! Mara! Grant called after me. I closed the door behind me. The moment the latch clicked, the trembling stopped. My spine straightened. My eyes dried. I looked at my watch. 10 minutes. I didn't go to the bathroom. I didn't go to the bar. I turned on my heel and walked purposefully toward the back of the venue, past the kitchen, past the staff lockers, straight to the heavy oak door marked Management, Authorized Personnel Only. I didn't knock. I pushed the door open. Inside, the office was a chaotic mess of invoices and blueprints. Sitting behind a desk piled high with overdue notices was a woman with gray hair pulled back in a severe bun, rubbing her temples as if she were trying to massage away a migraine. Elijah, the manager, stood next to her. They both looked up, startled. Ms. Kensington, Elijah said. I told you, Ms. Mercer is not. I stepped into the room and closed the door, locking it behind me. Ms. Mercer, I said, my voice clear, cold, and professional. My name is Mara Kensington, but for the next 15 minutes, You can call me Juniper Slate." The woman behind the desk froze. Her eyes narrowed. "The LLC that inquired about the deed transfer?" she asked, her voice raspy. "The same," I said. I walked forward and placed my phone on her desk. The screen displayed a draft contract, time-stamped 2 minutes ago. "I am not here to negotiate a wedding discount. I am here to make you a solvent woman again, but we have to close the deal right now." Vivian Mercer looked at me. She looked at my white dress. She looked at the determination in my eyes. "You are the bride out there," she said. "Not anymore," I said. "Now, I am the buyer." I pulled a chair out and sat down. "Let's talk numbers." Vivian Mercer was not what I expected. Based on the whimsical architecture of the Larkfield Conservatory, I had anticipated someone eccentric, perhaps a woman in flowing linen with paint on her hands. Instead, the woman sitting behind the cluttered mahogany desk looked like a retired litigator who had seen too many settlements go south. She was wearing a structured navy blazer that had seen better seasons, and her eyes, framed by severe spectacles, were sharp, tired, and currently filled with suspicion. The office smelled of stale coffee and old paper. It was the smell of a business in distress. "You have 3 minutes," Vivian said, not offering me a seat. She tapped a stack of red-marked envelopes on her desk. "I have a catering crisis to manage, a bank that calls me every 4 hours, and a bride, you, who should be out there cutting a cake, not barging into my back office." "I am not here to cut cake," I said, remaining standing. "And you do not have a catering crisis. You have a cash flow crisis. There is a difference." Vivian stopped tapping. She leaned back, her chair creaking under the strain. "Excuse me?" "I saw the agency staff," I continued, my voice clinical. "I saw the deferred maintenance on the East Wing flooring, and I know you are carrying a bridge loan that is likely accruing interest at somewhere around 12%. You are not managing an event. Ms. Mercer, you are managing a sinking ship." Elijah, standing in the corner, looked terrified. Vivian, however, just narrowed her eyes. "Who are you?" she asked, "because you do not sound like a Hale." "I am not," I said. "I am the managing partner of Juniper Slate LLC. I reached into my clutch. I didn't pull out the marriage license or the predatory trust agreement Cynthia had tried to force on me. I pulled out a heavy cream-colored business card embossed with simple black text, Juniper Slate, Asset Management and Acquisition. I slid it across the desk. It landed right on top of her overdue utility bill. Vivian picked it up. She studied it, then looked back at me. "Juniper Slate, you are the ones who sent the inquiry about the preservation easement last month." "We are," I confirmed. "We look for historic properties with architectural significance that are suffering from operational mismanagement. We inject capital, restructure the debt, and keep the doors open. We do not strip assets. We preserve them." Vivian let out a dry, humorless laugh. "And you are marrying Grant Hale? That is a conflict of interest if I ever saw one." "It is only a conflict if we are on the same side," I said. "We are not." I pulled the chair out and sat down, uninvited. "Let's be honest. Vivian, can I call you Vivian? You are stalling. You have told your creditors that you have an investor group lined up to buy you out, but they are dragging their feet, aren't they? They are waiting for the bank to foreclose so they can pick this place up for pennies on the dollar at auction." Vivian's face tightened. I had hit the nerve. "They promised a term sheet 2 weeks ago," she admitted, her voice losing its defensive edge. "They keep finding new things to audit." "They will never sign," I said bluntly. "They are bleeding you. It is a common tactic. Why buy the cow when you can wait for it to die of thirst and take the leather for free?" I unlocked my phone and placed it on the desk, screen facing her. It showed a PDF of a purchase agreement. "I am not here to bleed you," I said. "I am here to offer you a parachute. Full acquisition of the property and the business entity. We take on the debt. We keep the current management team, including Elijah, on a 2-year guaranteed contract. You stay on as a consultant for historical preservation, and I pay the market value, not the foreclosure value." Vivian looked at the screen, then at me. She was trying to reconcile the image of the woman in the white silk dress with the woman talking about debt restructuring. "Why?" she asked. "You are about to marry into one of the wealthiest families in Nashville. Why do you need my greenhouse?" "Because I need something that is mine," I said, "and because I know what it feels like to be undervalued." Vivian studied me for a long silence. Then she reached for a pack of cigarettes on her desk, thought better of it, and pushed them away. "You know," she said, her voice dropping to a conversational tone, "your in-laws are the reason I am overdrawn this month." I raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" "The Hales," she said, spitting the name out like a piece of gristle. "They came in here 6 months ago acting like they owned the city. They demanded the Saturday date, which was already held for a corporate retreat. They told me if I bumped the other client, they would make me the premier venue for the entire social season." She gestured toward the door, toward the party. "Then came the negotiation. They wanted the friends and family discount, then the local business support discount. When I pushed back, Cynthia Hale told me that if I didn't play ball, she would whisper to every event planner in town that my roof leaks and my kitchen has rats." My blood ran cold, but not from surprise. It was just confirmation. "So you gave them the discount," I said. "I gave them everything," Vivian said bitterly, "and they still haven't paid the second installment of the venue fee. They said they would cut a check tonight. Now I hear they are waiting for the wire to clear. I am hosting a $50,000 party on credit. Ms. Kensington, if I do not get that money by Monday, the bank locks the gates." "They won't pay you," I said. "Not on Monday, not ever. They will find a scratch on the floor or a cold appetizer, and they will sue you for breach of contract to avoid paying the balance. That is how they stay rich. They steal labor." Vivian slumped in her chair. She looked defeated. "So what is your offer?" "I pay off the Hale balance immediately," I said. "Consider it a bad debt write-off that I'm covering. Then, we execute the purchase agreement. I wire a 10% non-refundable deposit to your business account tonight. Right now. The rest follows escrow in 30 days. "Tonight?" Elijah squeaked. "Money talks, Elijah," I said without looking at him. "Everything else is just noise." Vivian looked at the document on my phone again. "And the preservation clause? You promise not to tear it down for condos?" "It is in Section 4, I pointed. "The structure remains. The mission remains. The only thing that changes is the name on the deed." Vivian was a businesswoman. She knew the difference between a promise and a contract. She picked up her reading glasses and bent over the phone, scrolling through the terms. She read slowly, murmuring the numbers under her breath. $2.4 million, she read, plus the assumption of the mortgage. "Correct." She looked up. "And you have this kind of capital? Without the Hales?" "The Hales do not know this money exists," I said, "and I intend to keep it that way. In fact, that is my only condition. Section 8, a strict non-disclosure agreement. You do not announce the sale until I give the signal, to the world, and specifically to the people in that room. You are still the owner until I say otherwise." Vivian looked at me, a slow, sharp smile spreading across her tired face. She began to see the game. She began to see the teeth behind my smile. "You are going to blindside them," she said. It wasn't a question. "I am going to adjust their reality," I corrected. Vivian picked up a pen from her desk. She tapped it against her chin. "You know," she said, "if you buy this place, you are not just buying the glass and the steel. You are buying the authority. The owner has the right to terminate any event for breach of contract. The owner has the right to remove any guest for conduct violations. The owner holds the liability insurance." She leaned forward, her eyes gleaming. "If you buy it, Ms. Kensington, you decide who stands on this stage, and you decide who gets thrown out into the parking lot." "I am aware of the privileges of ownership," I said softly. Vivian laughed. It was a genuine laugh this time. She opened her drawer and pulled out a tablet. "I can sign digitally," she said. "If the wire hits my account in 10 minutes, the keys are yours." I didn't hesitate. I pulled up my banking app. I navigated to the Juniper Slate operating account. I keyed in the amount, $240,000 for the deposit. Routing number? I asked. She recited it. I typed it in. Initiating transfer, I said. We watched the screen, a spinning wheel, a pause, and then a green check mark. Transaction successful. Vivian's tablet pinged. She looked down, her eyes widening as she saw the notification from her bank. The relief that washed over her face was physical. Her shoulders dropped 3 inches. She wasn't drowning anymore. "It is there," she whispered. "My God." "Sign the deed transfer," I said. She tapped the screen. She scribbled her signature. She pressed accept. "Done," she said. "The Larkfield Conservatory is under contract to Juniper Slate, LLC." She stood up and extended her hand. I stood and took it. Her grip was firm, respectful. It was the handshake of 2 equals. "Welcome to the hospitality industry, Mara," she said. "Thank you, Vivian." I turned to Elijah. He was staring at me with something approaching awe. "Elijah," I said, "go back out there. Tell the captain to keep the champagne flowing. I do not want anyone to suspect a thing. Business as usual." "Yes, ma'am," he stammered. Ms. Kensington? Or Ms. Slate?" "Just Mara," I said. "For now." I checked my reflection in the glass of a framed architectural drawing on the wall. My hair was perfect. My dress was smooth. My face was a mask of serene, bridal joy. But behind the eyes, the calculation was running hot. I walked to the door. "One more thing," Vivian called out. I paused, hand on the knob. "They are going to treat you like garbage when you go back out there," she said. "They are going to think they own you because you signed that paper in the other room." "I didn't sign the paper in the other room," I said. "I left it on the table." Vivian grinned. "Go get them." I opened the door and stepped back into the corridor. The noise of the party hit me instantly. The laughter, the clinking silverware, the hum of 200 people judging each other's net worth. I walked down the hallway, the heels of my shoes striking the floor with a new weight. I wasn't walking on their ground anymore. I was walking on mine. Every tile, every light bulb, every potted palm belonged to me. I turned the corner and re-entered the ballroom. Cynthia was the first to see me. She was standing near the cake, holding a glass of wine. She waved me over, her face twisting into a performative scowl. "There you are," she called out, loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. "We were about to send a search party. Did you get lost in the bathroom, dear? Or were you just fixing your face?" Grant was next to her. He looked annoyed. "You missed the photos with the senator. Mara, seriously." I walked toward them. I didn't rush. I didn't apologize. I moved with the fluid grace of a landlord inspecting a tenant. "I am sorry," I said, my voice sweet, light, and utterly hollow. "I just had to take care of a little business." "Business?" Cynthia scoffed. "Please, come here and stand still. The photographer is waiting." She grabbed my arm to position me. I let her. I let her pull me into the frame. I let Grant put his hand on my waist, his grip possessive and weak. I smiled for the camera. Flash. They thought they had trapped a mouse. They had no idea they were standing inside the lion's mouth. And I was just waiting for the right moment to close my jaws. The champagne flute was thrust into my hand with enough force to slosh the pale liquid over the rim, wetting my fingers. "Drink up," Cynthia commanded, her voice bright and brittle, like cheap tinsel. She was standing too close, invading my personal space with the aggressive intimacy of a jailer. "You look pale, Mara. A little liquid courage will do you good before we finish our business." She clinked her own glass against mine. Hard. The crystal rang out with a sharp, dissonant note. "To family," she said, her eyes daring me to contradict her, "and to knowing one's place within it." I looked at the glass in my hand. Bubbles rose in a frantic rush to the surface, popping as they hit the air. I did not lift it to my lips. Instead, I held it at chest level, steady and still. I looked at Cynthia, and I smiled. It was not the polite, nervous smile I had worn for the last 6 months. It was not the smile of the eager-to-please daughter-in-law. It was a closed, serene smile. It was the smile of someone who knows the punchline to a joke that no one else has heard yet. Cynthia frowned. The corners of her mouth twitched downward. She scanned my face, searching for the fear she had planted there 10 minutes ago in the staging room. She expected to see a trembling girl ready to sign away her autonomy. Instead, she found a wall. "Are you not drinking?" she asked sharply. "I want to keep a clear head," I said, my voice smooth. "Big night." "Suit yourself," she sniffed, turning her shoulder to me. "Just do not ruin the mood. We have guests to impress." Grant leaned in from behind me. His hand landed on the small of my back. Heavy and damp. He squeezed, his fingers digging into my skin through the silk of my dress. "I mean it. Mara," he whispered, his breath hot against my ear. "Mom is watching. The investors are watching. If you make me look like an idiot again, or if you stall on those papers, do not think I will forget it. You are lucky to be here." I turned my head slightly, just enough to catch his eye. "Luck has nothing to do with it, Grant." He blinked, confused by the lack of apology in my tone. But before he could respond, the room's audio system crackled to life. "Ladies and gentlemen," the master of ceremonies boomed, "if we could have your attention, the Hale family would like to invite everyone to gather near the stage for the official commemorative photograph. A new chapter begins tonight." The crowd surged forward, a tide of black tuxedos and designer gowns moving toward the riser. Grant grabbed my arm and pulled me along. We moved toward the center of the room, where the photographer was setting up a tripod. "Okay, family in the middle," the photographer shouted, waving his arms. "Mr. and Mrs. Hale, center stage. Grant, right next to your father. And, the fiancé?" "Mara," I supplied, stepping forward. "Right, Mara, you stand next to Grant." I moved to take my place beside Grant, but before I could plant my feet, Cynthia stepped directly in front of me. She didn't bump me. It was more deliberate than that. She glided into the space between me and the camera, her massive silver skirt billowing out to effectively erase my lower half from view. She angled her body so that her shoulder eclipsed my face. She was blocking me. In the official engagement photo, the visual record of this union, she was making sure I was nothing more than a ghost peeking out from behind her ambition. "Oh, sorry, dear," she laughed, not moving an inch. "It is a tight squeeze. Just tuck yourself in the back. You do not want to overshadow the elders." "Perfect," the photographer called out, clearly too intimidated to correct the woman writing his check. "Everyone say legacy." "Legacy," the Hales shouted in unison. I said nothing. I stood in the shadow of Cynthia's hair, looking at the lens. I didn't fight for space. I didn't try to lean out. I let them have the frame. Let them document this. Let there be photographic evidence of exactly how small they tried to make me. It would make the next hour so much sweeter. As the flash blinded us, a ripple of applause went through the room. We broke formation, and the guests descended upon us. A woman with a face pulled tight by surgery and diamonds the size of grapes grabbed Cynthia's hands. "Oh, Cynthia, it is marvelous," she gushed, her voice carrying over the jazz music. "And the girl? She is quaint." She turned her gaze to me. It wasn't a look of welcome. It was an inspection. "You must be pinching yourself," the woman said to me, tilting her head. "Coming from, where was it? East Nashville? And now landing in the Hale Sanctuary. It is quite a step up, isn't it? Like Cinderella, but with better catering." A few people nearby chuckled. It was that same cruel, exclusionary laughter I had heard all night. "She is very lucky," another relative chimed in. It was the uncle, Philip. He was holding a scotch and looking at me with undisguised contempt. "Most girls with her pedigree would kill for a view like this. Let's hope she knows how to maintain it. These things are fragile." He wasn't talking about the marriage. He was talking about my access to their money. I looked up. I looked past Philip's red face. I looked past the chandeliers. I looked up at the ceiling of the Larkfield Conservatory. The glass panes were dark now, reflecting the glittering lights of the party below. It looked like a cage made of golden light. To everyone in this room, this building was a symbol of the Hales' power. They thought they had rented a palace to show off their kingdom. They didn't realize they were standing inside a terrifyingly fragile ecosystem. And they didn't realize that the woman they were mocking, the lucky girl from East Nashville, was the one holding the hammer. They needed me to be afraid. I realized it with absolute clarity. Their entire social structure was built on the premise that everyone outside their circle was desperate to get in. If I wasn't desperate, if I wasn't grateful, then their power evaporated. They needed my fear to validate their safety. I felt a vibration against my thigh. I reached into my clutch and pulled out my phone. I kept it low, shielded by my body. It was a message from Marcus, my attorney. Documents prepared. The deed transfer is recorded in the county digital database. You are the legal owner of record as of 2 minutes ago. I have the cease and desist orders for the Hale Family Trust ready to serve. Do you want me to interrupt the speeches? I stared at the screen. The weapon was armed. The safety was off. All I had to do was type, yes, and Marcus would walk through those doors with a briefcase full of legal dynamite. I could end it right now. I could silence Philip. I could wipe the smirk off Cynthia's face. I looked at Grant. He was laughing with his friends, ignoring me completely. He looked so confident. He looked so safe. I looked back at the phone. Not yet, I typed. Let them talk more. I slid the phone back into my bag. It wasn't enough to just evict them. Not yet. They were still climbing. They were still piling their arrogance higher and higher, brick by brick. If I cut them down now, they would say I was crazy. They would say I was vindictive. No, I needed them to go further. I needed them to say it out loud. I needed them to prove, beyond a shadow of a doubt, exactly who they were. The best revenge isn't a surprise attack. The best revenge is handing your enemy the shovel and watching them dig their own grave, convinced they are building a monument. Mara? I turned. Cynthia was there again, holding the envelope from the staging room. She had retrieved it. She pressed it into my hand, her fingernails digging into my palm. Grant says you are feeling better, she said, her voice dropping to a hiss. The speeches are in 20 minutes. I want this signed and in my purse before the first toast. Do you understand? No more games. I took the envelope. I felt the weight of the paper. No more games, I agreed. Good girl, she said. She patted my cheek, a gesture so patronizing it made my teeth ache. You will see, once you give up control, life becomes so much easier. She walked away to take her seat at the head table. I stood alone in the middle of the crowd. The music swelled. The laughter roared. They were celebrating my submission. They were toasting to their victory. I looked down at the floor. I imagined the roots of the plants beneath the floorboards, stretching deep into the earth, my earth. I took a sip of the champagne. It was warm. Let them drink. Let them toast. They were drinking on my land. They were dancing on my floor. And in 20 minutes, when the music stopped, I was going to turn on the lights and show them exactly what the bill looked like. The heavy oak doors of the conservatory swung open with a resonant thud that cut through the low hum of the jazz quartet. It was not the tentative entrance of a late guest, but the commanding arrival of someone who owned the very ground they walked on. The chatter in the room died down instantly. Heads turned in a synchronized wave. Standing in the archway was Darius Wynn. In Nashville, the name Wynn was synonymous with the kind of money that did not need to shout. He was the chairman of the Historic Preservation Trust, a man who could greenlight a skyscraper or condemn a city block with a single signature. He wore a charcoal suit that was tailored with a precision that made the Hales' rented tuxedos look like costumes. Cynthia Hale gasped. She dropped the hand she had been waving in the air and smoothed the front of her silver dress, her eyes widening with a mixture of panic and predatory delight. She had not invited Darius Wynn. She was not important enough to invite Darius Wynn, but if he was here, it meant the Hales had finally ascended. "Oh my God," she whispered to Grant, clutching his arm. It is Darius. He came. He actually came. She practically sprinted across the parquet floor, her heels clicking a frantic rhythm. Grant followed her, adjusting his tie, a nervous smile plastered on his face. Mr. Wynne, Cynthia cried out, extending both hands as she reached him. What an incredible surprise. We are absolutely honored. Did you receive the invitation from the committee? We were not sure if you could make it, but to have you here for Grant's big night is simply magnificent. Darius stopped walking. He looked at Cynthia's outstretched hands, then up at her face. He did not smile. He did not take her hands. He looked at her with the polite confusion of a man who has been stopped by a confused tourist. I am sorry, Darius said, his voice deep and carrying effortlessly across the quiet room. I believe there is a misunderstanding. I am not here for the committee. Cynthia's smile faltered, the corners trembling. Oh? Well, whatever the reason, you are most welcome. Please, let me introduce you to my husband and my son. Grant, this is his engagement party, you know. Darius looked past her. He looked past Grant, who was trying to project confidence but looked like a schoolboy caught in the principal's office. Darius scanned the room, his eyes moving with laser-like precision over the sea of faces, dismissing the socialites and the bankers until his gaze landed on the shadows near the stage. I am not here for the party, Darius stated flatly. I am here because I received a priority message regarding the immediate structural preservation of this facility. I am looking for Mara Kensington. The name hung in the air like a dropped weight. Cynthia blinked. She looked as if he had spoken in a foreign language. Mara? Yes, Darius said. She sent me a dossier on the conservatory's operational deficits an hour ago. I need to speak with her about the funding strategy. Cynthia let out a high, nervous laugh. She touched Darius's arm, a familiar gesture that he clearly found distasteful, as he stiffened noticeably. Oh, Mr. Wynne, you must be confused, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. Mara is, well, she is nobody. She is just Grant's fiancée. She is a sweet girl, but she does not know anything about preservation or funding. She works in operations, I think. It is very low-level, administrative work. She turned to the crowd, inviting them to share the joke. The poor thing probably sent you an email by mistake. Cynthia continued, her voice rising to ensure the room heard her dismissal. She is very eager to impress. You understand? She comes from a very simple background. She likely does not even know who you are. Darius Wynne did not laugh. His expression hardened into stone. He slowly removed Cynthia's hand from his arm as if peeling off a leech. Mrs. Hale, Darius said, and his tone was so cold it could have frozen the champagne in the buckets. I have worked with Mara Kensington on 3 municipal redevelopment projects in the last 5 years. She is the only operator in this city I trust to balance a budget without hiding the losses in the footnotes. The silence that followed was absolute. The guests who had been whispering about my gold digging suddenly went very still. The women who had laughed at my dress looked down at their drinks. The narrative that Cynthia had spent the entire night building, that I was a clueless, hungry outsider, had just been dismantled by the most credible witness in the state. Darius continued, his voice rising slightly so that the back of the room could hear. If Mara called me here, he said, it is because she found something that the rest of you missed. She does not make mistakes, and she certainly does not waste my time. He scanned the room again until his eyes locked with mine. I was standing near the pillar, watching the scene unfold with the detachment of a judge. I gave him a small, professional nod. Darius nodded back. He walked right past Cynthia, right past Grant, and came straight toward me. The crowd parted for him like the Red Sea. Mara, he said warmly, extending his hand as he reached me. Good to see you. Hello, Darius, I said, shaking his hand firmly. Thank you for coming on such short notice. You said it was urgent, he said, glancing at the ceiling structure. And knowing you, urgent means the roof is about to cave in or the bank is at the door. Both, actually, I said softly. Cynthia was standing alone in the center of the room, her face a mask of shock and fury. Her narrative was crumbling. She had spent the entire night painting me as a helpless, money-hungry nobody, and now, the most powerful man in Nashville was standing in front of everyone, treating me like a peer and ignoring her completely. Grant snapped out of his stupor. He rushed over to us, his face red with a mix of embarrassment and anger. He grabbed my elbow, his fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. He pulled me slightly away from Darius, trying to regain physical control of the situation. "What is this?" he hissed, his voice trembling with rage. "What game are you playing? Mara, why is Darius Wynn talking to you?" "He is talking to me because he respects me, Grant," I said calmly. "You should try it sometime." "You are embarrassing my mother," Grant growled, leaning in close so only I could smell the scotch on his breath. "You are making us look like we are not in charge. Send him away. Tell him it was a mistake. Tell him you are just the bride." I looked at Grant's hand on my arm. Then I looked up at his face. For the first time, I saw him clearly. He wasn't a prince. He was a terrified little boy hiding behind a wall of money that he hadn't earned. "I cannot do that," I said. "Why not?" "Because I am not just the bride," I said, "and I am not playing a game. I am standing in my position, the position you never gave me." "Your position is beside me, keeping your mouth shut," Grant shouted. It was too loud. The veneer of civility cracked. People heard. Darius heard. Darius stepped forward, his eyes narrowing at Grant. "Is there a problem here, Mr. Hale?" Grant flinched. He let go of my arm as if it were hot iron. "No," Grant stammered, backing away. "No problem. We are just sorting out some family business." Cynthia had recovered her composure. She marched over, her smile fixed back in place with the rigidity of a death mask. She realized the tide was turning, and she needed to stop the bleeding. She positioned herself between Darius and me, addressing the crowd that was now watching us with rapt attention. "Everything is fine," Cynthia announced brightly, clapping her hands. "Mr. Wynn is just an old friend of Mara's. Isn't that wonderful? It just shows that our Mara has been networking." She turned to me, her eyes dead and cold. "But this is a family celebration," she said, her voice laced with a threat. "And we have official business to conclude. The toast is in 10 minutes, and Mara has not signed her welcome papers yet." She held up the envelope again, the white envelope with the predatory trust agreement. She waved it slightly. Like a flag of surrender, she expected me to wave back. "Come along, Mara," Cynthia said, holding out a pen. "Let's get this signed so we can all celebrate properly. Mr. Wynn can wait. Family comes first. Remember? This signature is the only way you officially join the house." It was a power move. She was trying to force me to submit in front of my professional ally. She wanted Darius to see me bow down. She wanted to remind everyone that no matter who I knew, I was still subject to the Hale family rules. She was daring me to refuse in public, knowing that refusing a prenuptial agreement, even a fake one, would make me look like the gold digger she claimed I was. The room went quiet again. Everyone was watching the envelope. They thought it was a standard prenup. They thought I was hesitating because I wanted their money. I looked at the envelope, then I looked at Darius. He was watching me with curiosity. He knew I wouldn't sign a bad deal. He knew I didn't sign bad deals. I looked back at Cynthia. "You are right, Cynthia," I said, my voice clear and steady. "Paperwork is important. It defines relationships. It sets boundaries." "Exactly," Cynthia said, thrusting the pen at me. "So sign it." I took the pen. I held it for a moment, feeling the weight of the metal. Then I capped it with a loud click. I did not take the envelope. "I will not be signing that, Cynthia," I said. Cynthia's face turned purple. "Excuse me? We discussed this. You said—" "I said I would sign the necessary paperwork," I corrected her. "And I will." I turned to Darius. "But I will not be signing a transfer of my rights to the Hale Family Trust," I said, looking back at Cynthia. Because the Hale Family Trust does not have the authority to manage my assets. In fact, after tonight, I am not sure the Hale Family Trust will have the authority to manage this party. What are you talking about? Grant demanded. You are talking nonsense. I am talking about leverage, I said. I reached into my clutch, but instead of the envelope Cynthia wanted, I pulled out a folded copy of the document I had signed in the back office 10 minutes ago. I am going to sign something else, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that only the circle around us could hear. But it is not the paper you prepared, and it is certainly not a surrender. Cynthia stared at me, for the first time. She looked genuinely afraid. She didn't know what I was holding, but she recognized the look in my eyes. It was the look of someone who wasn't bluffing. It was the look of the person holding the keys. Mara, she warned, if you ruin this night... The night is already over, Cynthia, I said. We are just waiting for the lights to go out. I turned to Darius. Mr. Wynne, if you would accompany me to the stage? I believe the owner has an announcement to make, and I think you will want to hear it from the front row. Darius smiled. It was a wolfish smile. He understood. Lead the way, he said. I turned my back on Cynthia and Grant. I walked toward the stage. I could feel their eyes boring into my back. I could feel the confusion of the crowd, but I didn't care. The witness had spoken. The character witness had cleared my name. Now, it was time to read the verdict. The jazz band trailed off into an awkward silence as Vivian Mercer walked onto the raised platform. She was not the harried, exhausted woman I had met in the back office 20 minutes ago. She had reapplied her lipstick. Her spine was straight. She held a wireless microphone in her hand like a gavel. I stood at the base of the stairs. Darius Wynne just a step behind me like a silent sentry. From here, I had a perfect view of the Hale family table. Cynthia was beaming. She nudged Grant, whispering something that was clearly self-congratulatory. In her mind, this was the part of the evening where the grateful venue owner publicly thanked the Hales for their patronage. She expected a tribute. She expected Vivian to tell the room how the Hales had single-handedly saved the cultural season. Cynthia stood up before Vivian even spoke. She started a slow, rhythmic applause, her chin held high. Listen up, everyone, Cynthia called out, silencing the few remaining conversations. Vivian wants to say a few words, probably to thank us for bringing such a lovely crowd to this old greenhouse. A few guests chuckled politely. Grant leaned back in his chair, swirling his drink, looking bored and entitled. Vivian waited. She let Cynthia finish her little performance. She waited until the room was absolutely silent, the kind of silence where you can hear the ice melting in the buckets. Thank you. Mrs. Hale, Vivian said. Her voice was amplified, clear, and devoid of warmth. But I am not here to offer thanks. I am here to make a disclosure regarding the status of the Larkfield Conservatory. Cynthia's smile faltered slightly, but she stayed standing. She looked confused, like an actress who had missed a cue. Disclosure? Cynthia laughed nervously. Oh, Vivian, do not be so formal. Just tell them how much we love the place. Vivian ignored her. She looked out at the 200 guests, her eyes sweeping over the investors, the socialites, and the bankers. Effective immediately, Vivian announced, her voice ringing off the glass ceiling. The Larkfield Conservatory has undergone a change of ownership. Tonight, just moments ago, I signed a binding agreement to transfer full control of this property and its operations to a new investment partner. The room went deadly still. Cynthia froze. Her hands were still raised in mid-clap. The color drained out of her face so fast it looked like a magic trick. Excuse me? Cynthia said, her voice shrill without the microphone. What do you mean? Change of ownership. You cannot sell the place in the middle of my son's engagement party. We have a contract. Vivian turned her body to face Cynthia directly. It was a brutal, deliberate pivot. We had a reservation. Mrs. Hale, Vivian corrected. A contract implies that both parties have fulfilled their obligations. We did, Cynthia snapped, looking around for support. We booked the entire venue. And yet, Vivian said, her voice dropping to a register that sounded like scraping metal. "The final deposit, which was due 48 hours ago, has not been received. My staff has been asking for payment all week. Your family has repeatedly delayed, asked for extensions, and implied that your name alone should be enough to cover the operational costs of this event." The crowd gasped. It was a collective intake of breath that sucked the oxygen right out of the room. This was the ultimate social sin. You could be adulterous, you could be mean, but you could never, ever be broke. Grant shot up from his chair. "That is a lie. The wire is pending." "The wire does not exist, Mr. Hale," Vivian said calmly. "I checked the transaction logs myself. There was no attempt to pay. There was only an attempt to intimidate my staff into working for free." Grant turned pale. He looked at the investors at his table, the men he was trying to impress with his family's stability. They were leaning away from him, creating a physical distance, as if his financial insolvency was contagious. "This is outrageous," Cynthia shrieked, her composure shattering completely. "I will sue you. I will ruin this place. You cannot just cancel us." "I am not canceling you," Vivian said. "I am simply informing you that as the former owner, I no longer have the authority to extend you credit. The venue now belongs to a new entity, and the new owner has strict policies regarding non-payment." "Who?" Cynthia demanded, looking around wildly. "Who did you sell to? Which one of these vultures bought it out from under us?" She scanned the room, looking at the competitors, the rival families. She thought she was being outmaneuvered by a peer. She thought this was a game of chess between dynasties. Vivian smiled. It was a small, satisfied smile. "The new owner prefers discretion," Vivian said. "Or rather, she did, until about 5 minutes ago." Vivian looked down at me. "The buyer asked me to hold the announcement until the paperwork was filed." Vivian continued. "But given the circumstances, she has authorized me to hand over the floor and the microphone." Vivian walked to the edge of the stage. She extended the microphone toward me. Cynthia followed Vivian's gaze. She looked down. She saw me standing there. For a second, she didn't understand. Her brain refused to process the visual data. She looked at me, then looked behind me, assuming Vivian was handing the mic to Darius Wynn. But Darius didn't move. He crossed his arms and smirked. I stepped forward. I took the microphone from Vivian's hand. The metal was cool against my skin. I felt a surge of electricity, a grounding current that ran from the soles of my feet straight up to my throat. I walked up the 3 steps to the stage. I stood where Vivian had stood. I looked down at them. I looked at Grant, who was staring at me with his mouth slightly open, his eyes wide with a dawning, horrific realization. I looked at Cynthia, who was gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles were white. I looked at the aunt who had called me a gold digger. I looked at the cousins who had laughed at my dress. I waited. I let the silence stretch until it was almost unbearable. "Good evening," I said. My voice was calm, conversational, and amplified to every corner of the room. "There seems to be some confusion about the guest list," I continued, "and about the definition of ownership." I walked to the center of the stage. "My name is Mara Kensington. Many of you know me as Grant's fiancée. Some of you know me as the +1, and quite a few of you know me as the girl who didn't belong at the head table." I paused. I made eye contact with the man who had asked if I worked in customer service. He looked down. "But titles are funny things," I said. "They change, just like property deeds." I turned to Cynthia. She was shaking her head, mouthing the word no over and over again. "You asked who bought the venue, Cynthia?" I said. "You asked who had the capital and the foresight to secure this building while you were busy counting the silverware." I took a breath. I did. The words hit the room like a physical blow. "I am the managing partner of Juniper Slate LLC, I said, my voice hardening. "And as of 25 minutes ago, I am the sole owner of the Larkfield Conservatory. I own the walls. I own the glass. I own the chairs you are sitting on. And I own the debt you refuse to pay." Silence, absolute ringing silence. Then, the sound exploded. It started as a murmur, A low rumble of shock, and then erupted into a cacophony of gasps, whispers, and exclamations. People turned to each other, eyes wide. The narrative had flipped so violently that the room was dizzy with it. The poor girl wasn't poor. The gold digger wasn't digging. She was the landlord. Cynthia collapsed into her chair. It wasn't a graceful faint. It was a structural failure. Her legs simply gave out. She stared up at me, her face a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. She wasn't looking at a daughter-in-law anymore. She was looking at her creditor. Grant stumbled forward toward the stage. He looked like he had been hit by a truck. "Mara," he croaked. What are you saying? You bought the venue? With what money? You work in operations." "I work in asset management. Grant," I said into the mic. "I have built a portfolio while you were building a bar tab, and I bought this place because I saw an asset that was being undervalued and mistreated, much like myself." The crowd laughed. It was a nervous, shocked laugh, but they were laughing with me. They were loving the show. "You cannot do this," Grant stammered, his voice rising in panic. "We are getting married. This is our party." "Is it?" I asked. "Because 10 minutes ago, I was told I was just a guest. I was told I needed to sign a paper to prove I wasn't stealing from you." I reached into my bag and pulled out the envelope Cynthia had given me. I held it up for everyone to see. "This is the document the Hale family asked me to sign tonight," I said. "A document giving them control over my finances because they believed I was a liability. They believed I was here to take something from them." I ripped the envelope in half. The sound was satisfyingly loud near the microphone. I ripped it again, and again. I let the pieces flutter down to the stage floor like confetti. "I do not need your money, Grant," I said. "I never did, and I certainly do not need your permission to stand on this stage." I looked at the crowd. "I apologize for the interruption to your evening," I said, my voice shifting back to professional warmth. "The bar will remain open, the band will continue to play, but from this moment on, this is no longer a Hale family event. This is a private function hosted by the new ownership." I looked down at Cynthia one last time. "And the new ownership has a very strict code of conduct regarding respect." Cynthia looked around. She saw the faces of her friends, her rivals, her social circle. They weren't looking at her with envy anymore. They were looking at her with pity. They were looking at her like she was a tenant who had just been served an eviction notice in front of the whole town. She had lost the room. She had lost the narrative. And she was currently sitting on a chair that belonged to me. Grant stood at the foot of the stage, looking up at me. He looked small. He looked insignificant. "Mara," he whispered, "please." "Please what?" I asked, lowering the mic slightly so only he could hear the edge in my voice. "Please save you? I thought that was my job, to be the little woman who needs saving." I straightened up and addressed the crowd one last time. "Enjoy the party," I said. "It is on the house, my house." I signaled the band leader. He was staring at me with wide eyes, his trumpet halfway to his lips. "Play," I commanded. He counted off immediately. The music started up, loud and brassy, cutting through the tension. I turned and walked off the stage, not toward Grant, but toward the back office where Vivian and Darius were waiting. I didn't look back. I didn't have to. I knew exactly what was happening behind me. The Hales were drowning in the middle of a ballroom, and I had just bought the ocean. The jazz band was playing a spirited rendition of a standard swing number, but the music felt miles away, down on the floor, in the center of the room where the Hale family stood, amidst the wreckage of their social standing. The air was thick with the static of impending violence. Cynthia Hale did not look like a matriarch anymore. She looked like a cornered animal. Her silver dress, which had shimmered with such authority an hour ago, now seemed to hang on her like a costume she had stolen. She lunged toward me, her face twisted into a rictus of fury that cracked through her heavy foundation. "You did this out of spite!" she screamed, her voice cutting through the brass section of the band. She did not care who heard her anymore. "You petty, vindictive little girl! You staged this entire charade because your feelings were hurt? Because we called you a gold digger? I stood my ground. Darius Wynn stepped up beside me, his presence a silent wall of granite, while Vivian Mercer flanked my other side. We formed a phalanx of reality against their delusion. "No, Cynthia," I said, my voice dropping to a register that was calm, low, and terrifyingly precise. "I did not buy a $2.4 million property because you insulted me. I have been insulted by better people than you. I bought this property because of what I read in the staging room." I pulled my phone from my clutch. In the staging room, before I had walked out, I had done what any competent chief operating officer would do when presented with a suspicious contract. I had photographed it. I tapped the screen and brought up the high-resolution image of Clause 14B. I held it out, not to Cynthia, but to Darius. "Read the highlighted section, Darius," I said. "Tell me what that looks like to you." Darius adjusted his glasses. He leaned in, squinting at the glowing screen. The crowd nearest to us, the bankers and the investors, leaned in too. They were like sharks smelling blood in the water. "Clause 14B," Darius read aloud, his voice booming slightly. "Grants the Hale Family Trust irrevocable power of attorney over all present and future assets. Right to liquidate without consent. Absolute management of spousal earnings." Darius stopped. He looked up, his face darkening with disgust. He looked at Grant, who was shrinking into his tuxedo. "This is not a prenuptial agreement," Darius declared, handing the phone back to me. "This is a conservatorship. This is the kind of legal instrument you use for a senile relative or a child who cannot be trusted with a debit card. It is a hostile takeover of a person's financial identity." He turned on Grant, his eyes blazing. "Is this what you were planning, Grant?" Darius asked, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. "You intended to strip this woman of her financial autonomy before the wedding cake was even cut? You wanted to own her?" Grant opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at the investors at his table, the men he needed to fund his lifestyle. They were all backing away. One of them, the man who had joked about asset stripping earlier, looked physically ill. In their world, you could be ruthless, but you had to be clever. Trying to enslave your wife legally in front of witnesses was not clever. It was desperate. It was just standard protection," Grant stammered, sweat beading on his upper lip. "We just wanted to protect the family assets." "What assets?" I asked. The question hung in the air. "That is the third truth, isn't it?" I said, stepping closer to him. "You kept calling me a gold digger. You projected that onto me so hard that I almost believed it myself. But gold diggers look for money. I looked at your books. Grant, there is no money." I turned to the crowd. "The Hales are not protecting a fortune," I announced. "They are protecting a deficit. They wanted me to sign that paper not because they were afraid I would take their money, but because they needed access to mine. They needed my credit score. They needed my income stream to plug the holes in their sinking ship." Cynthia let out a strangled noise, a denial that died in her throat. Vivian Mercer stepped forward then. She had been silent, letting the legal drama play out, but now she was ready to deliver the operational coup de grace. "She is right," Vivian said, her voice dry and factual. "In the hospitality industry, we talk, and the word on the Hale family is that they do not pay." Vivian gestured to the lavish decorations, the imported flowers, the crystal stemware. "This party cost $55,000 to produce," Vivian stated. "The Hales paid a $5,000 deposit 6 months ago. Since then, nothing. Every time my accounts department called, we were told to put it on the tab. We were told that the Hale name was good for it. We were threatened with bad reviews if we pressed for payment." She looked at Cynthia with cold eyes. "You were not throwing a party, Mrs. Hale. You were stealing a service. You were eating food you could not afford and drinking wine you had no intention of paying for." The room erupted in whispers. For the social elite, this was the ultimate nightmare. To be exposed not just as poor, but as grifters who lived on the charity of vendors? It was a death sentence. "Lies!" Cynthia shrieked, clawing at Grant's arm. "Tell them she is lying. We have millions in the trust." "The trust is illiquid," a voice from the crowd said. It was the uncle, Philip. He looked pale. He realized the game was up. "Most of it is tied up in litigation." "And the rest," I added, holding up my phone again, "is likely being used to service the interest on the loans you take out to maintain this facade." I swiped the screen on my phone to the banking app confirmation I had received earlier. "When I bought this venue tonight," I said, showing the screen to the group, "I did not ask for a tab. I did not ask for a friends and family discount. I wired a $240,000 deposit immediately. That is the difference between us. Grant, you pretend to have power. I have receipts." The screen showed the green checkmark of the transfer from Juniper Slate LLC. It was irrefutable proof of solvency. Grant looked at the phone. He looked at the numbers. He looked at me. The reality of what he had lost finally crashed down on him. He wasn't just losing a fiancé. He was losing the only person in the room who actually knew how to make money. He was losing his bailout. He reached out for my hand, his fingers trembling. His arrogance was gone, replaced by a pathetic, whining desperation. "Mara, please," he said, his voice cracking. "You are making a mistake. You are angry. I get it. But think about what you are doing. We are a team. We can fix this. If you expose us like this, if you humiliate us, you are destroying my future. You are destroying the Hale legacy." He looked at me with wet, pleading eyes. "Do not do this to me," he begged. "I love you." The words landed with a dull thud. They were hollow. They were the last chips of a gambler who had already lost his shirt. I pulled my hand away from his. I brushed the spot where he had touched me, as if wiping away a smudge of dirt. "You love the idea of me, Grant," I said. "You love the idea of a competent, quiet woman who runs your life while you take the credit. You love the safety I provide." I stepped back, putting distance between us. "And as for your future," I said, my voice echoing in the silent hall, "I am not destroying it. You destroyed it yourself." I looked him dead in the eye. "You destroyed it the moment you decided I wasn't a partner to be respected, but an asset to be controlled. You destroyed it when you sat there and let your family call me a whore because you were too cowardly to defend me. You destroyed it when you tried to trick me into signing away my freedom in a back room." I gestured to the crowd, to the staring faces of the people he had tried so hard to impress. "I am not the villain here, Grant," I said. "I am just the auditor, and I just found a massive discrepancy in your character." Grant flinched as if I had slapped him. He looked around. The circle had widened. His friends were gone. His investors were checking their phones, likely canceling meetings with him. His mother was weeping into a napkin, not out of sorrow, but out of shame. They were finished. I turned to Vivian. "Ms. Mercer," I said, "I believe we have some uninvited guests who are disrupting the event. Security should probably escort them out. After all, this is a private party for paying customers." Vivian smiled. It was the smile of a woman who had waited years to settle a score. "I believe you are right, Ms. Kensington," she said. She signaled to the security guards, the same ones who had stopped me at the gate 2 hours ago because my name wasn't on the list. They stepped forward, their faces grim. They knew who signed their paychecks now. "Mr. Hale," the lead guard said, gesturing toward the exit. "Mrs. Hale, if you would please." Cynthia looked up, her mascara running in black streaks down her face. "You cannot throw us out. We are the Hales." "Not in my building," I said. Grant looked at me one last time. There was no love in his eyes, only the cold, hard realization that he had bet against the house, and the house had won. He turned and walked away. His shoulders slumped. Cynthia followed him, dragging her silver train through the dust, muttering to herself. I watched them go. I watched them walk past the tables of people who used to fear them. I watched them walk through the heavy double doors and out into the night. The doors clicked shut. I stood alone in the center of the room. The air felt lighter. The smell of desperation was gone, replaced by the clean, sharp scent of victory. Darius Wynne raised his glass to me. To proper management, he said. I picked up a fresh glass of champagne from a passing tray. I raised it high. To ownership, I replied. I took a sip. It was cold, crisp, and tasted exactly like freedom. The security guards had almost ushered them to the threshold of the conservatory when Cynthia Hale dug her heels into the expensive parquet flooring. It was a physical refusal to accept reality, a desperate clawing at the frame of a picture she had been cut out of. She wrenched her arm free from the guard's grip, her bracelets jangling with a discordant crash, and spun around to face me one last time. The room, which had begun to dissolve into the murmurs of scandal, fell silent again. Everyone wanted to hear the dying gasp of the dynasty. "You are a fraud!" Cynthia screamed, her voice cracking under the strain of her humiliation. She pointed a shaking finger at me across the expanse of the room. "You planned this. You bought this place just to spite us. You are using our name, our prestige, to elevate yourself. You are the definition of a gold digger. Mara, you bought this venue with money you probably stole, just to embarrass the family that deigned to take you in." It was the same tired accusation, the same broken record she had been playing since the moment I walked into her life. But this time, the words did not sting. They just sounded exhausted. I walked slowly down the steps of the stage. I moved through the crowd, which parted for me with a mixture of awe and fear. I stopped 10 feet from where Cynthia stood, panting and disheveled. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not a monster, but a woman terrified of her own irrelevance. "You are wrong, Cynthia," I said. I spoke slowly, enunciating every syllable so that the back row could hear. "You have fundamentally misunderstood the definition of the word you keep using. A gold digger is someone who walks into a room to take things that do not belong to her. She mines value she did not create." I took a step closer. "I did not come here to take your money. I did not come here to take your status. I walked in here to take back the one thing I built with my own hands." "What is that?" she spat. "Your pride?" "My agency," I answered. "I walked in here to reclaim the right to say no." I turned to the room, addressing the remaining guests who were still holding their breath. "And on the subject of rights," I announced, checking the sleek watch on my wrist, "this party is officially concluded in 30 minutes. The previous contract with the Hale family has been voided due to non-payment and breach of conduct. If you wish to stay past midnight, you will be guests of Juniper Slate LLC, and the bar will be transitioning to a cash basis. The free ride is over." The reality of the eviction hit them. The Hale privilege, the assumption that everything would be provided endlessly and without cost, had just been revoked. At that moment, Grant broke away from the security guard at the door. He didn't run out. He ran back in. He rushed toward me, his tuxedo jacket flapping open, his face a mask of panicked realization. He understood what his mother did not. He understood that once they walked out those doors, the rumors would start, the credit lines would close, the investors would pull out, without me, without the stability I represented. He was just a man with a drinking problem and a mountain of debt. He slid to his knees in front of me. It was a chaotic, pathetic gesture. He grabbed the hem of my dress, his knuckles white. "Mara, stop," he begged, tears streaming down his face. "Please, do not do this. Do not end it like this. I can change. I promise I can change. Mom is just upset. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. Just do not kick us out. Do not humiliate me like this." The crowd stared. This was the golden boy, the heir apparent, kneeling on the floor, begging the woman he had ignored all night to save him. I looked down at him. I felt a distant pang of sadness, not for him, but for the time I had wasted believing he was a partner. "Stand up, Grant," I said coldly. "You are making a scene." "I will not stand up until you promise to give us another chance," he sobbed. "I love you. You know I love you." "You love my solvency," I corrected him. I reached into the inner pocket of my clutch. I had one final document. It wasn't the ripped pieces of the trust agreement. It was a thick, legal-sized envelope I had prepared 3 days ago, just in case my suspicions were confirmed. I pulled it out and slapped it onto the nearest cocktail table. The sound was sharp, like a gavel striking wood. "If you want to save any shred of your dignity," I said, pointing to the paper, "you will stand up and sign this." Grant looked at the envelope. He wiped his eyes. "What is it? Is it a new prenup?" "I will sign it. I will sign anything." "It is not a prenup," I said. "A prenup is for people who are getting married. This is a formal termination of engagement and a mutual release of claims." Grant froze. "It states that our engagement is dissolved immediately," I explained, my voice clinical. "It states that you have no claim to any of my assets, present or future. It states that you acknowledge that Juniper Slate LLC is the sole owner of this property, and that you have no rights to it, and most importantly, it contains a non-disparagement clause. If you sign this, I will not release the financial audit of the Hale Family Trust to the local press. Your secret debts stay secret. You get to walk away with your reputation damaged, but not destroyed." It was a mercy kill. I was giving him a way out. He could leave as the heartbroken ex-fiancé, rather than the exposed fraudster. "And if I do not sign," Grant whispered, looking up at me, "then I release the emails where you instructed your mother to hide your gambling debts in the wedding budget," I said. Grant went as white as the tablecloth. He scrambled to his feet. He looked at the pen I offered him. He looked at the crowd. They were watching him, judging him. He had to choose. He could keep fighting and lose everything, or he could surrender and keep his secrets. His hand shook as he took the pen. "I am sorry," he whispered. "Save it," I said. "Just sign." He bent over the table. He scribbled his signature on the line. It was a jagged, messy scrawl, but it was legally binding. The moment the ink touched the paper, I felt a physical weight lift off my chest. The knot that had been tightening in my stomach for 6 months finally unspooled. The marriage for power plot was dead. The trap they had set for me had been dismantled, and I had used the pieces to build a fortress. I snatched the paper away before he could change his mind. I handed it to Darius Wynne. "Witnessed," Darius said, nodding. "It is done," I said to Grant. "Now get out." Grant turned away. His shoulders slumped in defeat. He walked toward the door where his mother was waiting. Cynthia let out a wail, a long, high-pitched sound of pure despair. She reached out for the guests, for her friends, hoping someone would intervene. "Help us," she cried. "He forced him to sign." But no one moved. No one stepped forward. The social elite of Nashville were pragmatists. They saw where the power lay now. It didn't lie with the woman screaming in the doorway. It lay with the woman standing center stage, holding the deed. The guards finally escorted them out. The heavy doors closed with a final, resonant thud. The room was quiet. I turned to Vivian Mercer. She was standing by the stage, looking at me with a mixture of respect and disbelief. "Well," Vivian said, "that was decisive." "It was necessary," I said. I looked around the conservatory. Now that the noise was gone, I could see the beauty of the place again, the ironwork, the glass, the potential. It was too good to be just a backdrop for vanity projects like the one we had just witnessed. "Vivian," I said, "I want you to draft a press release for Monday morning." "Announcing the new ownership?" she asked. "Announcing the new mission," I corrected. "We are not going to be a wedding venue anymore, at least, not exclusively. I want to turn Larkfield into a community hub. We are going to host fundraisers for the arts. We are going to open the gardens to the public on weekends, and we are going to set up a grant program for young female entrepreneurs." Vivian's eyes widened. That will not be as profitable as the weddings." "I do not need it to be profitable immediately," I said. "I need it to matter. I want this place to be where people come to build things, not where they come to act like they are rich. No more acting, real value only." Vivian smiled. It was the first time I had seen her look truly happy all night. "I can work with that," she said. "I can definitely work with that." "Good," I said. "You run the house. Vivian, I will handle the bank. I looked at Darius. He gave me a small salute. You handled yourself well. Mara, the trust is lucky to have you. The trust does not have me, Darius, I said. I have myself. I handed him my champagne glass. I didn't want it anymore. I turned and walked toward the exit. I didn't look back at the guests who were now frantically texting their friends about the drama. I didn't look back at the stage where I had been humiliated and then vindicated. I pushed open the doors and stepped out into the cool night air. The humidity had broken. The sky was clear, filled with stars that looked sharp and bright. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with oxygen that didn't smell of expensive perfume and deceit. My phone buzzed in my hand. It was likely 100 messages from people inside asking for explanations, or maybe an apology text from Grant. I didn't check it. I turned it off and dropped it into my bag. I walked down the stone path toward my car. My heels clicked on the pavement, a steady, rhythmic sound. I wasn't the same woman who had walked in here 3 hours ago. That woman had been looking for acceptance. She had been willing to shrink herself to fit into a frame that was too small. I stopped at the gate and looked back at the glowing glass dome of the conservatory. It was mine now, but more importantly, my life was mine again. I didn't buy the venue to destroy the Hales. Their destruction was just collateral damage to my own construction project. I bought it because I needed to prove, once and for all, that my worth was not something to be negotiated at a dinner table. I opened my car door and slid into the driver's seat. I adjusted the rearview mirror, catching a glimpse of my own eyes. They were clear. They were calm. I didn't buy it for revenge. I bought it so I would never have to ask anyone for permission to be respected ever again. I started the engine and drove away, leaving the lights of the party fading in the rearview mirror, finally heading toward a destination that I had chosen for myself. Thank you so much to everyone who tuned in to hear this story of reclamation and justice. I would love to know where you are listening from right now. Are you listening on your commute, at the gym, or maybe relaxing at home? Please leave a comment below and let me know. I love reading about where our community is tuning in from. If you enjoyed watching the Hales get what they deserved, please make sure to subscribe to the channel Lila Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story get recommended to more people who need a little reminder to stand up for themselves. See you in the next story.